Most of our workers are coming from pretty middle class backgrounds, educated backgrounds, who have been able to make this shift of, hey, the world isn't as it's supposed to be, and maybe I can contribute to making the world a little bit of a better place, making the kingdom of God come in this way.
It's not so much about getting this project done and that project done. It's more about trying to be authentic to who God's made me to be and who He's calling me to be.
It's just about your passion for Jesus and for the poor, and your willingness to go and live with the poor. And then whatever comes out of that is fine.
The essence of servants is embodied in the principles of incarnation, simplicity, servanthood, community, and holism.
When we make our home in a slum, I feel like it's a response to the incarnation of Christ.
He comes from heaven. If you're talking about downward mobility, that's it right there.
It wasn't coming in a position of power or authority or wealth or any of that. Deliberate decision to come in vulnerability and in poverty. Jesus came to a very, very vulnerable situation, and that's why we do too. And despite the risks and all that stuff, it's worth it. I believe that change happens through relationship. Change won't happen through a course or a textbook or giving money or food or whatever. Change happens through relationship. So for us, that's why it's so important to live in a place rather than just give stuff or send stuff or do things.
Especially coming as a foreigner with, the white skin. A lot of times they see us as just handouts or something they're trying to see what they can receive from us, what they can get from us. And so I believe by living alongside of them and incarnating into their community, then we are able to sort of break those power dynamics so that we can really come alongside them more as peers instead of, as these dominating forces controlling their lives.
Servants is all about getting close enough to the poor to let ourselves be transformed, as well as allowing God to do whatever God would do with our neighbors. We do what we can to associate with the poorest of the poor, and people will ask us, why don't you just buy a fridge or a washing machine? And people have those things, but it would be too easy to keep getting any little time savers, any little comfort adders, and that's our personal challenges to ourselves to see what we can do sustainably. If we live like the common people, then that's the best opportunity to learn what their lives are like. And so in the desire of doing something to bring change, then we can do it together only from a place of understanding and connection. We don't want to come in as people from the outside with resources and education and say our way is better than your way. And people actually really resonate with that answer, and their faces light up, because what it's saying is you're valuable and what you want matters actually more than what we think you need. And then it opens people up actually to become our teachers, because they see that we're there to learn.
So often we come in thinking we know what it will look like to improve the lives of our neighbors, and we have the plan already in place. And so servanthood reminds me to enter as a learner, to learn from them. And it also reminds me to not overpower them with my expertise or my outside resources, but to really try to empower them, to enter as a servant and empower them and discover the dreams that they already have for how to better their communities.
We want to work together with the community that's around us to say, okay, what are the needs here, and what are the resources, and how can we work together to deal with that? We go as teams, we don't go as individuals, because you just, you burn out.
You're out of your home culture, out of your home language. It's tough. And so we'd say we've got a much better chance of pulling this off if we do it together.
We have team meetings once a week just to kind of check in with each other and say, hey, how you guys doing? And just help out one another
We as a team are trying to show a different way of doing life in the way that we love one another.
There are some really deep problems in Southall and that maybe we can't actually reach ourselves, like some of those issues of trafficking and stuff. And it's probably unrealistic to expect a lot of people in Southall to be able to address those issues because people feel so fragile a lot of the time themselves. And perhaps the best thing we can do is just to foster that sense of community resilience that is then better able to handle some of the difficult situations that are going on.
I'm not delivering programs to people, but I'm a neighbour who cares for the people I live amongst.
Unang-una sa lahat, nagugulat sila kasi nga, syempre, foreigner sila tapos dito sila titira sa amin sa isang kagaya nitong lugar na squatter area.
Nag-iikot siya dito, yung to visit surrounding. Marami na siyang kilala dito.
Pagdating naman sa pakikisama, magaling si Dave makisama kung ano yung problema ng isang mga kaibigan or kapitbahay. Lahat naman tumutulong siya.
If I am a good friend or a good neighbour, that means I'm there regularly and I'm there reliably so that they know they can call on me and I can go visiting and expect them to be there. And so it's reciprocal as well.
One of the important lessons that we learnt early on was that we weren't the saviour to the slum. and so that kind of means that you can be there as a fellow journeyer for with the people that are in this community, that we don't have all the answers and things, but this is kind of God's problem and we're there and hoping to be his hands and feet. We have many really normal ordinary days where you have really mundane conversations with people, but then you just happen to be there when something else happens. And because of that kind of proximity, you do take part in people's significant times. So, when people get sick and you're around, but also when people have babies, when people get a job, we've been able to be part of the celebrations.
We see in our neighborhood often that groups come in and maybe just preach at them and other groups just come in and hand out things. But I think on one side, what we find important is to really translate kind of what does the Bible say to everyday life? How do we resolve conflict? How do we do life together? And that can only be done when we're actually there and share life with people.
There are times where we tell spiritual stories and are able to get into people's lives that way. And there are times, we teach kids ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and it's the recognition that the education is really helpful in breaking the cycle of poverty and that aspect of it. And then just living life with people and saying, okay, what can we do to try and make this community a better place to live? Jesus could have spent his entire ministry just preaching, but he also ministered to people on a physical level and socially, and seeing that the good news is good news for the whole person.
Any way that we can help people become more whole is definitely a step in the right direction.
As well, we feel like people really need spiritual transformation. So when we see the biggest change happen is when people meet God and feel like that relationship to God is in place.
Often people will look at us and say, hey, wow, you live in a slum. Gee, you've done that for years and years. Wow, what an amazing thing. You must be really called to that. You must be a special person. I could never do that. We don't feel like we're special people. We feel like we're very ordinary people, reading the same Bible as anyone else.
My hope is for God to stir more people to begin to care about the poor and see that God's heart for the poor is central, and to know with so many people living in poverty today, we cannot ignore it. Certainly not everyone is called to live in a slum, but with 1 in 6 people currently living in slums, and that number rising, that percentage rising, I feel like the harvest is so great and the number of people amongst them is humiliatingly few. I think a great first step, if you're thinking, I don't know if I have what it takes to live in a slum, is to say, well, just for start, begin to hang out with the marginalized and the poor and the vulnerable in your own country.
Don't look at years and years in a slum in Asia or whatever. Just look at the next step. What can I do in my life now that takes me closer to Jesus, closer to the poor, closer to a life of vulnerability and sharing than I am now?
Find the people who are on the margins, find those who are lonely, those with mental illness, and spend some time with them.
Now, all of us have got a next step in our journey with Jesus. So don't look at us and say, oh, that's impossible. It's possible.
I know it's not for everybody, but I think more people are capable of it than suspect they are.
If you can do camping, the physicality of a slum, you could handle. The tough part is seeing the poverty and the suffering, hearing the domestic violence, etc. In many ways, I often feel like I'm the least qualified. I'm an introvert. I have a bad back. I hate rats. I hate cockroaches. But God has broken my heart and burdened my heart for the poor, and I want to be with them.
Whether you are thinking of working with servants or not, have the courage to take a leap of faith into giving your life to something. And it's scary, I know. And you're afraid to lose a lot of things, and you will lose maybe some things, but have faith that you will also receive a lot of beautiful things, which are very different maybe than what you expect.